Picture a place where fundamental human rights are stripped away, and survival turns into a harsh test of endurance behind towering walls and barbed wire. Some of the world's most infamous prisons inflict such terrifying punishments that they push the boundaries of human suffering. From the relentless isolation in the Alcatraz of the Rockies to the deadly gang violence within overcrowded Venezuelan cells, these prisons are far more than mere correctional facilities. They are nightmares designed to shatter the human spirit. If you're curious about what life is like within these living hells, prepare for a journey through the 20 most brutal prisons and the horrifying punishments they impose. Starting with number 20, we visit ADX Florence in the United States. Known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies, ADX Florence is the most secure prison in America, where few inmates ever escape. This supermax facility was constructed in 1994 to house the nation's most dangerous criminals. However, it's not only the razor wire fences and reinforced walls that contribute to its notoriety, it's also the profound psychological isolation that inmates endure. Terrorist detainees in supermax prisons often face force feedings to keep them alive. Imagine being confined in a small, soundproof cell for 23 hours a day, completely isolated from other human beings. No conversation, no natural light, no respite. This extreme isolation can drive even the most resilient individuals to the edge, resulting in depression, paranoia, and hallucinations. Critics assert that such conditions amount to psychological torture, testing human limits in ways that are nearly unimaginable. What is life like within this fortress of solitude? Why do many claim it is worse than death? Now, let's turn to a particularly chilling topic. Recently, images of an alleged prison surfaced, claiming the existence of a secret facility somewhere in the world where prisoners are kept in steel cages under the scorching sun. To make matters worse, the merciless warden reportedly sets bonfires nearby to intensify the heat. What prison could this possibly be? Experts have been unable to pinpoint its location, leading some to believe it may be an elaborate hoax designed for morbid entertainment. What do you think? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Moving on to number 19, we have La Santé Prison in France. Located in Paris, La Santé is a place where history intertwines with horror. Established in 1867, this notorious institution once hosted public guillotine executions, drawing crowds to witness the gruesome spectacle in its courtyard. Although the guillotine has long been retired, the suffering inside continues. Currently, the prison houses around 2,000 inmates, including some of France's most dangerous criminals and political prisoners. Life inside La Santé is characterized by severe overcrowding and deplorable conditions. Inmates are crammed into tiny, filthy cells where the stench of decay and despair lingers. The psychological toll is enormous, leading to one of the highest suicide rates in the French prison system. Many prisoners find themselves on the edge, caught between the oppressive atmosphere and the violence of both fellow inmates and guards. Despite efforts for reform and a temporary closure for renovations in 2014, little has improved. Reports of abuse and neglect continue to emerge, and suffering persists behind the stone walls of this infamous prison. Finally, at number 18, we examine Evin Prison in Iran, which has gained infamy due to chilling reports and testimonies from former inmates. Unlike many prisons plagued by overcrowding, Evin is notorious for its extreme torture methods used on inmates, often to extract confessions or for no clear reason. Established in 1972 during the reign of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the last Shah of Iran, its notoriety grew after the 1979 Iranian Revolution, as the new regime intensified its crackdown on dissent. Evin became synonymous with severe human rights violations. Numerous accounts reveal brutal interrogations involving physical and psychological torture, with methods such as beatings, solitary confinement, and mock executions being commonplace. Legal rights are routinely disregarded, leading to many inmates being denied fair trials and legal representation, resulting in arbitrary and harsh sentences. One of the most notorious incidents in the prison's history is the 1988 massacre, where thousands of political prisoners were executed, drawing international condemnation for the prison's brutality. The case of Zahra Kazemi, a Canadian-Iranian journalist who died after being tortured at Evin Prison, further underscored the extreme measures imposed on detainees. Her death highlighted the brutal methods utilized against prisoners. Additionally, the ongoing imprisonments of human rights lawyer Nasreen Sotoudeh due to her activism emphasized the continued repression in Iran. These incidents have garnered significant media coverage and condemnation from the international community, resulting in sanctions and increased scrutiny of Iran's human rights record. Number 17 is Tadmor Prison in Syria. Originally established as military barracks in the desert by French authorities during the 1930s, Tadmor later became a prison notorious for its treatment of political prisoners, especially those opposing the Assad regime. It symbolizes severe political repression. One of the most infamous events occurred on June 27, 1980, when around 1,000 inmates were executed in retaliation for a failed assassination attempt on Hafez al-Assad. Tadmor is known for its systematic torture methods, which include beatings, electric shocks, and forced positions that inflict pain. Inmates endure extreme and inhumane conditions marked by severe overcrowding, poor nutrition, and inadequate sanitation, leading to a high mortality rate. Palestinian writer Salam Kale, who spent 2 years in Tadmor, described it as the worst place in the world, arguing that it cannot truly be considered a prison, as human rights should exist in such facilities. He emphasized that prisoners are left with nothing but fear and horror, where brutal torture and whippings are prevalent. Guards exercise unchecked power, often resorting to lethal force against inmates if deemed necessary. The prison was closed in 2001, reopened in 2011, and was ultimately destroyed by the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant in 2015. Number 16 is Pitești Prison in Romania. Known for its extreme brutality, particularly during the late 1940s and early 1950s under the communist regime. Initially intended to house political prisoners, it became a site for horrific re-education experiments aimed at forcibly converting anti-communist activists, intellectuals, students, and religious figures to the regime's ideology through systematic torture. The prison environment was characterized by severe physical and psychological abuse, with inmates subjected to relentless beatings, electric shocks, and forced labor. They also suffered from malnutrition, inadequate medical care, and overcrowded conditions, exacerbating their suffering. The most notorious aspect of Pitești Prison was the re-education program led by Eugen Turcanu, an inmate who became a torturer. This program aimed to dismantle the identities and loyalties of prisoners through intense physical torture and psychological manipulation, forcing inmates to denounce and physically assault their peers. This period, lasting from 1949 to 1951, was filled with humiliation and degradation, leaving lasting psychological scars on survivors. When details of the torture program emerged, they sparked national and international outrage, leading to trials that held some individuals accountable, including the execution of Turcanu and others involved. The grim reality faced by inmates in such prisons raises important questions about the nature of punishment and whether individuals deserve such treatment for their crimes. Number 15 is Qinshan Prison in China, where dehumanization begins the moment inmates enter. Stripped of their identities, they are assigned 4-digit numbers instead of names. The first 2 digits represent their year of arrival, while the last 2 indicate their order of entry. This system reflects the prison's cold efficiency, reducing individuals to mere statistics. Life inside is characterized by strict hierarchies and harsh conditions. Food rations are meticulously calculated based on various factors, such as age, crime, and social status, both within and outside the prison. Showers are a rare privilege, offered only once a week or less, depending on behavior, and even exercise must be earned, reinforcing a relentless regime of control. At night, prisoners are forced to sleep with their hands visible above the sheets under constant surveillance. Unlike many other prisons, Qinshan does not carry out executions. Instead, inmates endure grueling labor with the belief that they can eventually be reformed and contribute to society. Among its most notorious residents were high-profile figures like Kang Sheng and Shi Bucha, who were subjected to the same punishing routine as everyone else. Number 14 is Black Dolphin Prison in Russia, infamous for its extreme measures, where inmates are required to stand for about 16 hours a day without the opportunity to rest or sit. As one of the oldest prisons in the country, it has developed a reputation for its harsh treatment of prisoners. It employs strict protocols, including blindfolding inmates during transport to prevent them from memorizing the layout and planning escapes. This facility houses some of the most dangerous criminals, including terrorists, cannibals, and serial murderers, all serving life sentences. Inmates are required to engage in 90 minutes of exercise each day, during which their cells are searched for contraband. The only permissible items are newspapers, radios, and books, while meals consist of sour soup served 4 times daily. Guards conduct rounds every 15 minutes, and prisoners must respond to commands with "yes, sir," reflecting the prison's rigid control. These high-security measures are designed to regulate inmate behavior and movements, prioritizing discipline and minimizing the risk of escapes. Number 13 is Rikers Island in New York, which has faced intense scrutiny due to the high levels of violence and abuse reported within the facility. This has resulted in multiple legal rulings against the state. One of the most notorious practices at Rikers is the strip search policy, requiring even individuals arrested for minor offenses to undress and undergo lengthy private cavity searches. Furthermore, inmates, particularly teenagers, are often used as enforcers, a practice quietly supported by guards and correctional officers. These enforcers intimidate and physically assault fellow inmates, perpetuating a culture of inhumane treatment. The use of force, including physical assaults and isolation, is common, and harsh disciplinary measures enforced by guards have contributed to numerous inmate deaths over the years. Given this troubling history, there have been increasing calls for reform or even the closure of Rikers Island. Advocates for criminal justice reform stress the need for alternative approaches to incarceration and significant improvements in living conditions for those detained. Number 12 is Pollsmoor Prison in Cape Town, South Africa, a brutal battleground dominated by gang hierarchies that dictate every aspect of life, determining who survives and who does not. Designed to hold around 4,000 inmates, the prison currently houses over 7,000 individuals in its decaying structure, with the population fluctuating daily. This extreme overcrowding exacerbates chaos, as poor ventilation and inadequate medical care facilitate the rapid spread of diseases like tuberculosis. Inmates are crammed into bungalow cells, sometimes with 40 individuals in a room, stacked in double and triple bunk beds. The conditions here are often more desperate than in many other facilities, with some inmates locked and due to contagious illnesses. Such cramped conditions not only breed illness, but also escalate tensions between rival gang factions, often resulting in riots and violent confrontations. Even prison guards are not immune, sometimes caught in the crossfire of these brutal conflicts. Despite being the prison where Nelson Mandela was once held, Pollsmoor remains a site of relentless suffering, with human rights organizations continuing to condemn it for its appalling conditions, highlighting the neglect and oppression that characterize life inside. Number 11 is Kamatai Maximum Security Prison in Nairobi, which serves as a stark reminder of the darker sides of justice. Established in 1955, this notorious institution has long been associated with suffering and neglect. Once a detention center for political prisoners during the turbulent 1980s and early 1990s, Kamatai's history is marred by executions and brutal treatment. Over the years, the prison has gained infamy for its grim living conditions, leading to tragic outbreaks of disease. A cholera outbreak in 2009 claimed at least 8 lives, emphasizing the dire health standards that continue to plague its halls. Originally built to accommodate 1,400 inmates, the population has more than doubled, creating a suffocating environment where daily life becomes a struggle for survival. Inmates face the additional horror of dehumanization, often subjected to severe beatings by guards. Although some improvements were made following government interventions in 2002, the scars of its brutal past remain, solidifying Kamatai's reputation as one of the most notorious prisons in the world. Within these walls, hope flickers dimly, overshadowed by the persistent realities of despair. Number 10 is San Quentin Rehabilitation Center in California, the oldest penitentiary in the state, established in 1852. It serves as the largest death row facility for male inmates in the United States and has housed some of history's most infamous criminals, including Edward Bunker. With its lengthy history, San Quentin has developed a dark reputation. Many areas within the prison are outdated, unsanitary, and in disrepair, putting inmates at risk of disease. Disturbingly, inmates frequently experience violence from guards and officers, while gang-related conflicts are common, leading to clashes and killings among inmates. Those incarcerated face prolonged periods of isolation, torture, and beatings as a means of control imposed by correctional staff. The harsh realities of life at San Quentin have inspired numerous movies, documentaries, television shows, and books. Number 9 is the Hwarian Concentration Camp, or Camp 22, in North Korea, which stands as a grim symbol of the regime's brutal control and harsh treatment of its people. Shrouded in extreme secrecy, this camp was designed specifically for political prisoners, often imprisoning entire families as punishment under the regime's guilt by association policy. Life inside is a living nightmare, with inmates forced into backbreaking labor in mines, factories, and farms while enduring relentless deprivation. Even the guards and prison staff are not immune to the camp's brutality, as defectors and satellite images have revealed shocking details of widespread torture, physical abuse, and executions. Malnutrition and disease run rampant due to a severe lack of food, medical care, and basic necessities, resulting in high mortality rates. Cramped and filthy living quarters isolate prisoners from the outside world, amplifying their suffering. Psychological torture is equally severe, with inmates subjected to constant threats and forced to witness the brutal punishment of others. Although reports in 2012 suggested the camp's closure, its true status remains a mystery, serving as a chilling reminder of extreme human rights violations within North Korea's prison system. Number 8 is Gitarama Prison in Rwanda, formerly known as Mahanga Prison, notorious for its horrific conditions, making it one of the deadliest prisons in the world. Designed to hold only a fraction of its current population, it now crams around 7,000 inmates into a suffocating, overcrowded space. Many prisoners are forced to stand shoulder to shoulder in cramped cells, with no room to lie down and minimal access to clean water or sanitation. The result is a breeding ground for disease and despair, with malnutrition and illnesses like gangrene rampant. On average, 8 inmates die each day due to these appalling conditions. The suffering doesn't end there. Guards subject inmates to relentless physical and psychological abuse, with beatings, intimidation, and forced labor being daily realities. Prisoners work under brutal conditions without any compensation, while human rights organizations repeatedly raise alarms over these violations. Despite international outcry, Gitarama remains a stark symbol of neglect, where basic human rights are stripped away and survival itself becomes a daily battle. Number 7 is El Rodeo Prison in Venezuela, a brutal battleground where survival hinges on a fragile balance of power and corruption. Basic necessities like food, clean water, and healthcare are scarce and often manipulated by corrupt officials, who use these resources as tools of control over the inmate population. The treatment of prisoners varies sharply based on their social status and influence within the prison. Those with connections or perceived power receive slightly better conditions, while lower-ranking inmates are left to suffer. The influence of gangs within El Rodeo exacerbates the misery as they control access to essential resources, creating a dangerous hierarchy that worsens the already dire living conditions. Overcrowding is rampant, forcing inmates into unsanitary, cramped spaces where diseases spread unchecked. Deadly illnesses are a constant threat, and gang riots frequently erupt as prisoners struggle for survival. Despite attempts by the government and military to curb the chaos and implement reforms, the core issues remain unresolved. El Rodeo serves as a stark reminder of the urgent need for a comprehensive overhaul of Venezuela's prison system, where neglect and corruption fuel a relentless cycle of suffering. Number 6 is Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary in California. commonly known as Alcatraz. Located in San Francisco Bay, it was constructed between 1910 and 1912 as a military prison and became infamous as one of the most formidable federal correctional facilities in the United States, operating from 1934 until 1963. Its isolated location and strong currents made escape nearly impossible, earning it the nickname The Rock. The prison housed notorious criminals like Al Capone and the Birdman of Alcatraz, further cementing its infamous status. Inmates faced harsh conditions in small solitary cells with limited privileges and rigid routines. Disciplinary actions often included solitary confinement for minor infractions, resulting in severe psychological stress that challenged inmates' sanity. Several prisoners, including Ed Wootka, tragically committed suicide, while others resorted to self-mutilation due to the trauma they experienced. The prison's extreme security and treatment of inmates inspired the film Escape from Alcatraz, which focused on the daring escape of 3 inmates. Alcatraz was closed in 1963, but later reopened to the public as a museum, allowing visitors to explore its storied past. Number 5 is Bang Kwang Central Prison in Thailand, often referred to as Thailand's Bangkok Hilton. Originally built to house 3,500 inmates, it now holds over 8,000 people, including long-term and death row inmates. From the outside, Bang Kwang Central Prison appears to be an ordinary facility, characterized by high walls and razor wire. However, passing by evokes a chilling sense of the horrors inside. Inmates endure grueling labor and dire living conditions, with as many as 25 inmates sharing cramped spaces and cells designed for far fewer occupants. Access to basic necessities such as medical care, food, and hygiene is often severely lacking. The prison operates under a strict regime, forcing many inmates, particularly newcomers or those on death row, to perform tedious labor while wearing leg irons. As of 2018, the prison was infamous for housing around 510 death row inmates, with executions primarily conducted by lethal injection. Life within these walls is harsh, characterized by insufficient and poor quality food, inadequate health care, and frequent reports of abuse. The situation is even more complicated for foreign inmates, who grapple with language barriers and the stress of being far from home. Despite the existence of some educational and vocational training programs, the overall environment significantly contributes to intense mental strain among the prisoners. Number 4 is Diyarbakir Prison in Turkey, which is notorious for its brutal conditions and harsh treatment of inmates, particularly during the 1980s and 1990s. Established following the 1980 military coup, it became a primary detention center for Kurdish activists, political dissidents, and alleged members of the Kurdistan Workers' Party (PKK). The prison was infamous for severe overcrowding, with inmates crammed into small, unsanitary cells, while the lack of proper food and medical care exacerbated their suffering, leading to widespread disease and malnutrition. Reports from this period detail extreme torture methods, including beatings and electric shocks. One of the most harrowing aspects was the Death Corridor, a section of the prison notorious for torture and executions. The 1982 hunger strikes by Kurdish prisoners drew international attention to the appalling conditions, resulting in several inmate deaths. These protests highlighted the prisoners' desperation and their willingness to risk everything to fight against their treatment. Despite global outcry, the Turkish government at the time did little to address these issues, allowing the situation to persist. While some reforms have been made in recent years, issues like overcrowding and poor conditions still plague many Turkish prisons, including Diyarbakir. Human rights organizations continue to monitor these conditions and advocate for improvements, emphasizing the need to uphold human rights standards in detention facilities. Number 3 is Mendoza Prison in Argentina, officially known as Prison Number 1 of Mendoza. It has earned a notorious reputation due to several critical issues affecting its operations. One of the main concerns is severe overcrowding, which has led to deplorable living conditions for inmates. This overcrowding often results in inadequate access to essential necessities such as sanitation facilities, healthcare services, and sufficient living space, heightening tensions among the inmate population. The overcrowded environment also fosters gang activity, compromising the safety and well-being of both inmates and prison staff. Organizations have consistently raised alarms about the treatment of inmates at Mendoza Prison, with reports of physical abuse and neglect highlighting the dangerous conditions within the facility. Inmates frequently encounter challenges in accessing legal representation and medical care, further increasing their vulnerability. Additionally, the prison's failure to provide effective rehabilitation programs exacerbates these issues, limiting efforts to reduce recidivism and hindering inmates' successful reintegration into society upon their release. Number 2. Guldani Prison in Georgia. Guldani Prison in Tbilisi, Georgia, became infamous following a scandal in 2012 that uncovered severe human rights violations against inmates. Shocking video footage showed prison guards physically abusing prisoners, igniting widespread outrage both within the country and internationally. This revelation prompted urgent calls for reform in Georgia's prison system. The incidents at Guldani highlighted systemic issues, including a lack of oversight of power by prison guards and inadequate conditions for inmates. In response to the scandal, Georgia launched efforts to reform its prison system, which included improvements at Guldani Prison. These reforms aim to enhance transparency, accountability, and overall conditions within the facility. Specific measures included increased monitoring of prison operations, training staff on human rights standards, and implementing legal reforms to reduce overcrowding. While some progress has been made in these areas, the situation at Guldani serves as a stark reminder of the ongoing challenges in ensuring humane treatment and adequate conditions for prisoners in Georgia. Number 1. Maracaibo National Prison in Venezuela. Maracaibo National Prison in Venezuela is infamously known for its extreme overcrowding, with 3,700 inmates crammed into a facility designed for only 700. The situation is dire, compounded by chronic understaffing, with just one guard for every 150 inmates, and limited funding that hampers efforts to maintain order. Gangs dominate the prison, transforming it into a lawless and hazardous environment. Basic necessities such as food are insufficient, and living conditions are appalling, with hygiene often overlooked. Inmates struggle daily to survive in an environment devoid of essential elements for humane living. The relentless cycle of violence continues due to frequent clashes among inmates, fueled by the unbearable stress and frustration caused by these harsh conditions. The combination of overcrowding, scarcity of resources, and rampant gang activity makes Maracaibo National Prison an exceptionally dangerous and challenging place to be. We're coming to an end here today. Thanks for watching, and for such top listing videos, subscribe to our channel.